Hello and welcome to GuyLogic. My name is Temko and this is Pavilion, a handcrafted 2D puzzle game. It is a puzzle game in the classical sense of the word, where you run around and solve puzzles. There's no platforming involved, and in fact the control scheme is very minimal, only consisting out of movement and an interaction button. The game works fine on both keyboard and a controller, but there are some issues regarding that. The game is developed by Isometric Media, and as far as I can tell, this is their first title. It's coming out on PC as well as PlayStation, but obviously we are taking a look at the PC version. Now this is chapter 1 of 2 upcoming chapters. I'm not sure when the next chapter is going to be released, so this is about half the game. So let's go ahead and dive into it, shall we? As I said, it's a 2D handcrafted puzzle game. As such, I don't really expect many option menu options in terms of graphics at the very least, because again, handcrafted generally means that it is a very set title. But what I did not expect was no options whatsoever, and I mean that in the literal sense. There isn't an option menu to so much as mute audio, lower volume, or change your resolution, and that is a damning shame. There's also no way to bind anything to your mouse or rebind your control keys, even though minimal they are. I'm not sure why they opted in for the arrow keys on the keyboard as the control scheme as opposed to W, A, and D, or even the mouse button, which would have made a lot more sense on a computer. And again, I tried the game on a Steam controller with the analog stick and that worked fine as well, but I'm really baffled by their keyboard control scheme. It just seems very suboptimal, and in fact, I switched to the Steam controller because it was suboptimal to play using the keyboard controls as opposed to the controller controls. Again, I think just binding the movement to mouse would have been a much more elegant solution on a PC platform, and I'm a bit sad they haven't done so. And obviously all the other facts that there's no option menu to speak of means you can't lower sound or any other assets, and that is damning on a PC title. So having burned it on that part, let's go ahead and dive into the gameplay itself. So I've played a bunch of the game, and what I'm going to do is show you a little bit of gameplay about an hour into the game, so I don't spoil the very cool world. So let's go ahead and dive in. So diving into the game proper, this is a gameplay about an hour in, and Pavilion is all about manipulating various objects so that the character in the game can move forward to find his objective. Now what that objective is a big mystery, and that isn't really fully resolved in this episode. But the idea is that's a surreal dream world, and you can sort of notice that it switches between very strange vistas, landscapes, machinery, and robotic faces, or even sculptured faces in the area surrounding the character, and it's pretty damn cool at that. And then sometimes it switches to a more modern feel, where suddenly there's a couch or a book or have a living room superimposed on this surreal background, where it even switches you back to the actual, well, I suppose actual world, where things do look normal and you still have to interact with objects in the same way. So it's all about interacting with objects. Now, the way you interact with objects is this little glowing orb. Now, when you interact with something, like I'm doing with this big cube, at that point, the glowing orb disappears and you can move that object around, either using your arrow keys on the keyboard. As I said, that's a very suboptimal way of doing it, I feel, or using an analog stick on a controller. When you are not interacting with something in the game world, you have your little orb flying around, and that can move the camera in various directions, so take a look at the level or scene as a whole. I do like this approach in terms of movement. As I said, and I repeat, I think the movement scheme is very suboptimal and does detract quite a bit from the gameplay experience. Now the game introduces new mechanics slowly, but it doesn't introduce gameplay complexity. It's a very slow-paced and relaxing title. That is, unless you get very frustrated from puzzles. But if you're the sort of person that enjoys puzzles and enjoys figuring out the solution based on variety of metrics, then this is the sort of game you might enjoy. Sit back, enjoy the music, enjoy the phenomenal art style and level design, and just try and figure out the puzzles. If you're the kind of person that enjoys that sort of thing, I feel Pavilion is a very solid title in that genre. But it does have some issues in my opinion. One of the issues I feel is a lack of control you have in many situations over your character. Because you don't actually control your own main character directly, but only direct him using things like shadow and light, using things like glowing orbs, using things like bells that draw him in a specific direction. you end up in situations where, because you're not using the mouse and you're not using a precise controller, you end up messing up and having to redo entire segments time and time again. And that is quite frustrating, because there's no good reason for this to be the situation outside of the fact that the control scheme isn't as optimal as it should be. The game combines a very slow-paced, very methodical way of solving puzzles, and then throws in timing-based solutions which it doesn't really have the facilities for to accomplish. A very solid example of that is very early on in the game. You have to perform a bell-based puzzle. So you press the bell on one side, the character moves in that direction, and when he passes a certain point, you press a different bell so the character switches direction to chase that bell, and that way it navigates a certain maze. The problem is that if you mistime the bell, the character is still going to follow that second bell and take a completely different route all the way back to the start. Now you might say, well, then don't mistime the bell. The problem is that because the way the camera works and the way the bells work is that there's a delay in between you clicking and the actual execution of the sound. There is a delay between you moving your camera in position because you have to interact with a different object, and that takes a few seconds, which means you have to, instead of just interacting with the bell and switching the direction the character is going to be moving in, you have to keep in mind all these various delays that are built in for the various actions to take place, and that is a bit of a shame. And that is actually my only criticism in regards to Pavilion's control scheme and metrics. Now the game has some other flaws as well. As I said, a lack of an options menu does mean that, well, you can't change audio levels. And this is something I just do not comprehend on any level. There is no good reason in any way, shape, form, or fashion why you shouldn't be able to change the audio levels. I can get around the game not having graphical options, even though there I would have liked things like maybe a higher texture pack or something like that. But there's no good reason not to have audio options at all, even if this is only a master volume, which would have made it a better overall experience instead of being drowned in ambient noise in many situations, no matter how pretty, and not getting the actual feedback I'd like from a game in terms of interactive moments or other clues. That is a definite drawback from the fact that there's no way to control your audio levels. Another issue I've run into with the game is that even though the game is very atmospheric and very good at pacing itself quite well in terms of introducing new mechanics, in terms of introducing new types of environments for you to enjoy and visually explore, the game doesn't allow a lot of off-the-beaten-track pathways or off-the-beaten-track exploration. The main reason for that is obviously because you do not control the actual main character, but only control the direction he goes to interaction with different objects. It ends up that you have to figure out if there's even a way for you to get to a certain location to explore a certain segment of a vista. I feel this is a major letdown from the fact that this game's main drawing point in terms of its gameplay and aesthetic experience is the combination of puzzles and hand-drawn unique graphics and unique art style. And I just don't know why the developers would choose to, one, limit the player's control in terms of visually exploring the level. I can understand limiting control for gameplay purposes, but here they visually limit the control for visual purposes, where you can't explore the various vistas, where you can't enjoy the various looks, because this game does look phenomenal in every sense of the word. Every single scene is a thing of beauty, and it should be explored. It should be looked upon in awe because it is very, very beautiful. But the developers feel that you should only experience these various scenes in passing as your character moves from point A to point B following a predefined object to interact with. That is a damn shame. Now, moving away from all the visual stuff and all my issues with not having the actual controls I need to customize my PC title, the game does have some very cool things in regards to its puzzles. Now, the game's puzzles are slow to introduce and do ramp up complexity in a very slow fashion. Maybe too slow for some, but I personally, because I'm not really good at puzzle games, did find this to be quite a nice space of introducing complexity. Now, as I said, Pavilion is coming in 2 parts, and while we have no current release date for part 2, if you are interested in Pavilion, there is no real reason to wait on part 2 outside of wanting to complete the entire game in one go. Because while Pavilion Part 1 is quite interesting, its replay value is essentially non-existent. Outside of enjoying the various visual vistas, the game is exceedingly linear and does not allow for any deviation of any sort. As I said, The control scheme, coupled with the very linear interaction of very specific preset objects, only allows for singular solutions to many puzzles and only allows a single playthrough without repeating large chunks of the game, if not all chunks of the game, for no particular reason. So that is the trade-off in having a very focused title that is driven behind a very specific experience. The game is trying to show you its artistic style, it's trying to show you its world, it's trying to draw you into this dream landscape of, I'm assuming, some of these psychosis or some other form or fashion. It's very interesting what they've done, it's very cool what they've done, but it does draw back from the fact that the game then suffers from a lack of replay value. But for a one-time playthrough, the game is pretty phenomenal, as I said, if you enjoy the puzzle genre as it is. It doesn't have platforming, it doesn't have combat, it doesn't have any form of action sequencing or anything like that. It's pure puzzle solving coupled with beautiful graphics, and it does a pretty good job of those two. You can check the game out on Steam if you are so inclined, and if you like this video, press that like button below. If you didn't like this video, there's a dislike button for exactly that, and leave a comment. Tell us what you liked, tell us what we can do better. We want to hear back from all of you. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below and we will deliver. And until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogic.